Hey, welcome back to the channel. Imagine finding a tiny copper coin in an old jar, dusty and forgotten, only to discover it's worth more than a luxury mansion. These aren't just small pieces of metal, they're million-dollar treasures hiding in plain sight. Today, we're diving into the world of Australian half-pennies, coins that most people once thought of as loose change, but are now selling for jaw-dropping sums at auctions. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might completely change the way you look at coins forever. First up, the year 1939 marked a significant turning point in Australian coinage history with the introduction of the iconic Kangaroo Reverse design on the Australian halfpenny. This was not just the birth of a new look for one of the nation's most circulated coins, but the beginning of a legacy that would last for decades and forever tie Australian currency to one of its most recognizable national symbols. The 1939 Australian halfpenny, also known as the Roo halfpenny, replaced the older Commonwealth design and immediately stood out as a modern representation of the country's cultural and natural identity. The obverse of the coin retained the portrait of King George VI, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, while the reverse featured the bounding kangaroo motif, created by George Kruger Gray. This design was simple, elegant, and patriotic, and it quickly became the hallmark of Australian bronze coinage. But what makes the 1939 halfpenny so incredibly valuable today, with some examples selling for up to an astonishing $950,000 in high grades, is its rarity, its transitional nature, and its historical importance. Not only was this the very first year of issue for the Kangaroo Reverse, but it was also minted in far fewer numbers than later dates. Collectors place tremendous value on first-year issues, particularly when they are in pristine mint state condition. And that's exactly the case with this halfpenny. Many circulated heavily during the wartime years that followed, meaning that examples in higher grades are exceptionally difficult to find. When one does appear at auction, especially graded superb gem or proof-like, it attracts feverish bidding from collectors and investors alike. The story behind the 1939 Roo halfpenny is also a reflection of Australia's broader shift in coinage identity, moving from ties to British imperial imagery toward a uniquely Australian representation. For this reason, it is not just a coin, but a symbol of national pride, and that symbolic weight drives its desirability and value. Today, it sits at the top of many collectors' wish lists and remains one of the crown jewels of Australian numismatics. Next up, we turn to the 1940 Australian halfpenny, a coin that may not carry the exact same historic debut significance as the 1939 issue, but is nevertheless a highly sought-after rarity in its own right. The 1940 halfpenny continued with the Kangaroo Reverse design and King George VI in obverse, but its minting occurred during a time of global turmoil as the Second World War was escalating. The mintage of this year's coin was relatively low compared to later wartime years, and circulation wear was extremely heavy due to the economic and material strains of the conflict. This combination of lower production and heavy usage has made the 1940 issue a scarce survivor in higher grades. While circulated pieces are reasonably available to collectors, true mint state examples are incredibly rare and can command staggering values at auction, with prices reaching up to $185,000 for top-graded coins. The reason for this premium lies in both condition rarity and collector demand. Collectors pursuing complete sets of Australian halfpennies often find the 1940 issue to be a stumbling block, especially if they're aiming for gem or near-gem examples. Even when coins appear relatively problem-free, issues such as weak strikes, spotting, and copper toning are common, meaning only a tiny handful can achieve the grades that bring the highest premiums. The coin itself also tells the story of Australia as resilience in the face of war. Every day, citizens handling these small bronze pieces while their nation mobilized. Soldiers went off to fight, and industries shifted to support the war effort. Today, the 1940 halfpenny is a treasured relic of that period, and collectors who secure one in exceptional condition hold not only a scarce coin but a true piece of history. Its market value of $185,000 in high grades reflects both its rarity and its significance as part of Australia's wartime coinage heritage, making it an enduring star in the field of numismatics. Next up, the 1941 Australian halfpenny stands as one of the most coveted treasures in the realm of Australian numismatics. This was a coin struck during a pivotal year in world history, when Australia was deeply engaged in the Second World War, facing unprecedented challenges both domestically and abroad. Despite the chaos of the era, the Kangaroo Reverse design, introduced just 2 years earlier in 1939, remained on the halfpenny, symbolizing the strength, resilience, and identity of the nation. On the obverse, the portrait of King George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget connected Australia's currency to its ties with the British Commonwealth, but the bounding kangaroo on the reverse captured the distinctly Australian spirit. What elevates the 1941 halfpenny to extraordinary levels of value is its incredible rarity and top grades. While millions were struck for circulation, the vast majority were heavily worn down through daily use during wartime. People used these coins constantly in an economy where every small denomination mattered, and survival far outweighed the thought of preserving coins for future generations. As a result, uncirculated examples are extremely scarce, and superb gem specimens are virtually unheard of. When one appears at auction, collectors are willing to pay astonishing sums, with values soaring as high as $720,000 for pristine, high-grade pieces. This staggering figure reflects not just the scarcity of the coin itself, but also the intensity of collector demand for early kangaroo half-pennies in near-perfect condition. The 1941 issue also carries historical weight, representing a year when Australia's fate in the Pacific was uncertain, and every part of the nation's economy, including coin production, was geared towards supporting the war. For collectors today, owning a 1941 halfpenny in exceptional preservation is akin to holding a symbol of endurance and a tangible reminder of a defining chapter in Australia's past. Next up, we have the 1942 Australian halfpenny, a coin that tells another remarkable story within this wartime series. Though it is not as astronomically valuable as the 1941 issue, by 1942, Australia's involvement in the war had intensified dramatically, with Japanese forces advancing in the Pacific and the country facing real threats of invasion. The demand for coinage remained high, and while the kangaroo design continued on the reverse with King George VI on the obverse, production of halfpennies in this year was complicated by resource shortages and the shifting priorities of war. The 1942 issue is interesting because it represents one of the years when multiple mints were involved in striking Australian coins, including facilities outside the country such as Bombay and San Francisco, to meet demand. The standard 1942 halfpenny minted in Australia, however, is a rarity in high-grade condition. Circulated pieces are relatively common, but when preserved in mint state, especially above gem quality, they can reach exceptional values, with top examples selling for up to $95,500. The challenge for collectors lies in finding coins free of the usual issues that plague bronze pieces such as weak strikes, spots, and heavy toning, because these coins were issued during a time when the economy relied heavily on small change. Nearly every piece saw extensive wear, making pristine survivors highly sought after. For numismatists, the 1942 halfpenny is more than just a collectible. It is a piece of wartime history, minted during one of the darkest years for Australia as it stood shoulder to shoulder with its allies. Owning one of these coins in superb condition is like holding a fragment of resilience, a reminder of a nation's endurance during its greatest test. Its market value of $95,500 in top condition reflects both its scarcity and its deep connection to a time of global conflict that shaped the course of history. Next up, The 1942 Australian halfpenny struck at the Bombay Mint in India is one of the most fascinating and valuable coins in the entire halfpenny series. During the height of World War II, Australia faced an enormous challenge. The Royal Australian Mint facilities simply could not keep up with the demand for coinage while also supporting wartime production. To solve this, Australia turned to allied mints overseas, and one of those was the Bombay Mint in India. The I Mint mark beneath the date on the coin distinguishes these issues from those struck in Australia itself, and that small letter carries with it an immense amount of historical and numismatic significance. These coins were struck under wartime conditions, shipped across dangerous seas, and introduced into circulation in a nation facing rationing, economic stress, and constant uncertainty. The obverse of the coin features King George VI, while the reverse proudly retains the bounding kangaroo design by George Kruger Gray, a symbol of Australia's strength and resilience even during its darkest hours. What makes the 1942 ZI issue so valuable, with prices in pristine condition reaching an extraordinary $540,000, is the combination of rarity, condition scarcity, and its unique story. Most of the coins struck in Bombay were shipped and heavily circulated in everyday use, meaning they picked up wear quickly, and very few were ever saved in pristine, uncirculated condition. Moreover, bronze coins struck in tropical and humid conditions often suffered from spotting, uneven strikes, or corrosion, making high-grade survivors even rarer. Collectors value this coin not just for its numismatic beauty, but for its place in history. An Australian coin struck on foreign soil, sent back to serve a population in crisis. For many, this coin is a physical reminder of how global the war effort truly was, and how nations supported each other in the fight against tyranny. When one of these coins appears at auction in superb condition, it is met with intense bidding, and its six-figure value reflects both its rarity and its symbolic significance. The 1942 I halfpenny is a crown jewel for any collector, a piece that ties together Australia, India, and the world's wartime struggle in a single coin. Next up, we have the 1943 Australian halfpenny, another standout from the wartime era, and a coin with a fascinating legacy of its own. Like the issues before it, the 1943 halfpenny bore the trusted design of King George VI on the obverse and the bounding kangaroo on the reverse. However, the 1943 issue stands out because of its immense scarcity and the highest grades, with top condition examples realizing auction values as high as $395,000. This year was especially critical for Australia, as the war in the Pacific had reached its peak and the nation was stretched thin on resources. Millions of these coins were struck, but the sheer intensity of circulation meant that almost all of them were worn down within a few years of use. Small denomination coins like the halfpenny were essential in the wartime economy, used daily for basic goods, rations, and services. Saving coins was simply not a priority for most people, so the few pristine examples that exist today are nothing short of miraculous survivors. Collectors prize the 1943 issue for several reasons. First, it represents the resilience of Australia during the war years, and the Kangaroo Reverse had by then become a deeply entrenched symbol of national pride. Second, its market rarity and mint state condition makes it one of the most challenging dates to acquire for a complete set of Australian halfpennies. Even coins that appear attractive at first glance often fall short of gem quality due to strike weakness, surface marks, or the natural tarnish that affects bronze. That is why the handful of coins graded at the very top levels command such extraordinary premiums, with collectors competing fiercely whenever one appears at public sale. Beyond its financial value, however, the 1943 halfpenny represents a story of endurance. A small bronze coin that circulated through one of the most difficult times in Australian history and yet somehow managed to survive in unblemished form. Its current high-grade market value of $395,000 cements it as one of the greatest treasures of the halfpenny series. a coin that continues to captivate historians, collectors and investors alike. Next up, the 1943 Australian halfpenny, struck at the Bombay Mint in India, is a fascinating chapter in the story of Australia's wartime coinage. By 1943, the war in the Pacific was at its most intense stage, and Australia's domestic minting capacity was stretched to its absolute limits. To meet the enormous demand for coins at home, overseas mints such as Bombay were again called upon to strike Australian currency. The I mint mark below the date tells us that this halfpenny was produced in India, and though millions were struck, the reality is that very few have survived in pristine, uncirculated condition. The obverse carries the familiar portrait of King George VI by Thomas Humphrey Paget, while the reverse continues to showcase George Kruger Gray's bounding Kangaroo, a design that had, by this point, become firmly entrenched as a symbol of Australia's resilience and national pride. What elevates the 1943 halfpenny to its current high-grade market value of $85,500 is the immense scarcity of top-condition examples. While the Bombay Mint produced these coins in large numbers, most entered circulation immediately and were used heavily during the war years when coins were desperately needed in everyday transactions. The climate of India and the transportation conditions of the time also meant that many coins suffered from problems such as poor strikes, uneven planchets and surface spotting. As a result, finding a 1943 halfpenny that is not only uncirculated but also free of significant flaws is a tremendous challenge. Collectors prize this issue not only for its condition, rarity, but also for its historical symbolism. It represents a period when Australia's currency needs were so urgent that production had to be outsourced halfway across the world. To own a superb example is to hold a tangible piece of that global wartime cooperation, a coin that links Australia and India in a shared struggle. At auction, the demand for these coins in top condition is fierce, and their value continues to reflect both their rarity and their historic weight in the grand story of Australian coinage. Next up, we arrive at the 1944 Australian halfpenny, a coin struck in the closing years of World War II, and one that has become an extraordinary rarity in numismatic circles. At first glance, the 1944 issue might appear to be a fairly standard continuation of the Kangaroo Reverse and King George VI Obverse, but when examined in high-grade condition, its story takes on a whole new level of significance. During 1944, Australia was still deeply involved in the war effort, with vast resources devoted to supplying troops, building war equipment, and managing the economic pressures of the conflict. Bronze coins such as the halfpenny were essential in daily life, circulating constantly through the hands of citizens who were focused on survival, rationing and rebuilding. Very few coins from this year were saved in pristine condition, and most were quickly worn down in circulation. This scarcity of mint state survivors is what drives the incredible value of the 1944 halfpenny, which can command as much as $175,000. At auction, when found in superb gem quality, condition rarity is the defining factor here. Most coins from this year that surface in collections are circulated, toned or damaged in some way. Only a tiny handful exist in the kind of preservation that advanced collectors seek, and when these pieces do appear, they create enormous excitement in the numismatic community. Beyond the rarity factor, the 1944 halfpenny represents resilience. During one of the toughest years of the war, a coin that passed through countless hands in a time when every cent mattered to families struggling with rationing and uncertainty. To hold a flawless 1944 halfpenny today is to hold a time capsule of that era, a coin that not only represents monetary value but also the strength of a nation enduring hardship. Its high-grade market value of $175,000 ensures that it remains one of the standout treasures of the Australian halfpenny series, a piece forever tied to both the history of the war and the evolution of Australia's national coinage. Next up, The 1945 Australian halfpenny is one of the most extraordinary coins in the entire Kangaroo halfpenny series, a piece that has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide. Struck in the final months of World War II, this coin represents both an end and a beginning, an end to the darkest chapter of the 20th century and the beginning of Australia's journey into post-war recovery. The obverse features King George VI, whose portrait had been a constant presence on Australia's wartime coinage, while the reverse proudly displays the bounding kangaroo by George Kruger Gray, a design that by now was recognised internationally as a uniquely Australian symbol. Millions of halfpennies were struck in 1945, but what separates this coin from the ordinary is not its mintage, it's the almost impossibly rare survival of high-grade examples. During the war years, coins were used relentlessly in daily commerce. Families relied on them for essential goods, soldiers spent them in barracks, and shops used them constantly in an economy still under rationing. Hardly anyone thought to save coins straight from the mint, and so the overwhelming majority of 1945 half-pennies were worn down within a short time. This is why when a mint-state specimen appears at auction, it commands staggering sums, with top-graded coins reaching as much as $660,000. The rarity in this case is almost entirely about condition. Collectors pursuing a complete set of kangaroo halfpennies often find the 1945 issue to be one of the greatest stumbling blocks, because while circulated examples are available, true gems are so rare that they almost never come to market. Beyond its numismatic scarcity, the coin carries an incredible emotional weight. It was struck in a year when Australians could finally see hope on the horizon, when victory in Europe was near and the war in the Pacific was turning. To hold a pristine 1945 halfpenny is to hold a symbol of survival, of a nation that endured hardship and sacrifice yet still pressed forward with its identity and pride intact. This deep historical resonance, combined with its breathtaking rarity, makes the 1945 halfpenny one of the crown jewels of Australian coin collecting. Next up, we move to the 1946 Australian halfpenny, a coin minted during the very first full year of peace after the war had ended. By this time, Australia was beginning the long and difficult process of rebuilding. Soldiers were returning home, industries were shifting back from war production to civilian needs, and society was slowly regaining a sense of normalcy. In this context, the halfpenny continued to play a vital role in everyday transactions, and millions were minted to support a population adjusting to peacetime life. The design remained the same, King George VI on the obverse and the kangaroo on the reverse, a symbol of continuity during a time of change. But once again, what makes the 1946 issue so valuable is not its overall mintage, but its survival in the highest grades. Bronze coins from the mid-1940s were notoriously prone to heavy circulation wear, corrosion and unattractive toning. Very few were saved in pristine condition, and even fewer have survived to the present day with the sharp detail, luster and clean surfaces that collectors crave. As a result, the 1946 half-penny can command as much as $105,000 in top mint state condition, placing it firmly among the elite rarities of the series. Collectors view this issue as a symbolic piece of Australia's transition from wartime austerity to post-war optimism. Every 1946 halfpenny that survives in gem quality is a time capsule from that moment of national renewal, a coin that not only carries financial value, but also historical meaning. When such a piece comes to auction, it invariably sparks intense bidding, as collectors recognize how rarely such opportunities present themselves. Its six-figure value in high grade reflects the combination of scarcity, demand, and the enduring allure of the Kangaroo halfpenny series. Next up, the 1947 Australian halfpenny is one of those remarkable post-war issues that has grown into a legend among collectors because of its sheer scarcity in the finest grades. By 1947, Australia was slowly stabilizing after the war, and life was beginning to resemble something closer to normality. Soldiers had returned home, industries were revitalized, and coin production was back in full swing. Yet, despite the mintage numbers being relatively healthy, the vast majority of 1947 halfpennies were destined for hard circulation. The coin's obverse once again carried the dignified portrait of King George VI, while the reverse retained the bounding kangaroo design, by now a firmly established national icon that Australians proudly identified with. What truly makes the 1947 halfpenny stand out is its extraordinary value when preserved in mint state condition. Circulated examples are fairly common, but finding one in gem uncirculated quality is another story altogether. Most coins from this year suffered from heavy wear, environmental damage or unattractive toning, meaning the number of surviving pristine examples is tiny. When one of these elusive coins surfaces at auction, it can command astonishing sums, with high-grade specimens reaching up to $285,000. Collectors and investors alike recognize that the rarity lies not in the mintage, but in the survival of quality pieces. Beyond its monetary value, the coin carries symbolic weight. It reflects Australia's transition into a new era of prosperity while retaining the familiar coinage designs that had carried the country through war. Owning a 1947 halfpenny in top grade is like holding a perfect relic of Australia's post-war rebirth, a coin that resonates with both historical and numismatic significance. Next up, we come to the 1948 Australian halfpenny, a coin that on the surface might appear relatively ordinary compared to some of the more celebrated wartime rarities, but which has proven to be incredibly challenging in high-grade preservation. The 1948 issue continued with King George VI on the obverse and the bounding Kangaroo on the reverse, and while mintages were sufficient to meet the country's needs, the fate of most of these coins was the same. They circulated heavily in the pockets and tills of Australians, rebuilding their lives after years of conflict and rationing. The coin was a workhorse of the economy, used daily for essentials, which meant that very few survived without significant wear and tear. The rarity of pristine examples is what drives the 1948 halfpennies value in the collector's market, with top-graded specimens reaching up to $75,500. Condition rarity is everything for this coin. Bronze issues of this period were prone to spotting, discoloration, and weak strikes, which makes the hunt for a flawless example particularly difficult. For collectors assembling complete sets of Australian halfpennies in high grade, the 1948 issue is often one of the key challenges, as truly gem-quality coins are so seldom encountered. Its value is a testament not only to the scarcity of uncirculated survivors but also to the broader story it represents. The ongoing evolution of Australian coinage in the mid-20th century, bridging the gap between the war years and the stability of the 1950s. When one of these coins does appear at auction in pristine condition, it generates intense interest, reflecting its status as a hidden rarity within the series. The 1948 halfpenny, with its $75,500 market value in top grades, continues to capture the imagination of collectors and remains a cornerstone piece for those determined to build the ultimate kangaroo halfpenny collection. Next up, the 1949 Australian halfpenny is one of the true stars of the post-war kangaroo series, a coin that shines not only because of its rarity in pristine condition but also because of its historical context. Australia in 1949 was a nation entering a new era. The war was behind it, industries were booming again, and a sense of optimism was beginning to spread across the country. Yet, despite this brighter future, the humble halfpenny continued to play a crucial role in everyday transactions, circulating constantly through shops, markets, and households. The obverse features the portrait of King George VI, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, while the reverse bears the enduring kangaroo, designed by George Kruger Gray, a motif that had by then become a national icon on Australian currency. While millions of these coins were struck, The survival of examples in top mint state condition is extraordinarily rare. The 1949 half-penny is notorious among collectors for being difficult to find without heavy wear, spotting or toning, which is why its high-grade market value can soar to as much as $375,000. The reason for this value is simple: condition rarity. The overwhelming majority of coins from this year were used heavily in circulation, worn down by the daily demands of a nation transitioning from austerity to prosperity. Only a very small number were ever saved in pristine condition, and those pieces today stand as near mythical survivors. When one of these flawless examples comes to auction, competition is fierce, as advanced collectors recognize that the chance to acquire one may not come again for years. The coin also represents a moment of transition in Australian coinage history, as the end of King George VI's reign was only a few years away. Owning a gem 1949 halfpenny is therefore like holding a perfect snapshot of a nation on the cusp of change. Valuable not just for its numismatic rarity, but for the story it tells of post-war Australia. Next up, we arrive at the 1950 Australian halfpenny, another coin that continues the proud Kangaroo series and holds its own place of distinction among collectors. By 1950, Australia was firmly on the road to recovery, and the economy was stabilizing. The Kangaroo halfpenny was still a cornerstone of small change, with millions circulating across the country. On the surface, the design remained unchanged: King George VI's portrait on the obverse and the bounding kangaroo on the reverse. But for collectors today, the real story lies in the scarcity of high-grade survivors. While the coin was widely used, very few examples survived untouched, and the relentless handling of these coins over the years means pristine specimens are almost never encountered. This scarcity is what drives the 1950 halfpenny's impressive market value, which can reach as high as $150,000. For the finest uncirculated examples, bronze coins from this era were particularly vulnerable to spotting, dull toning, and strike weakness, making it even more challenging to find coins of true gem quality. Collectors who aim to build complete sets of Australian halfpennies in high grades often struggle with the 1950 issue, as its rarity and top condition has long been recognized in the numismatic community. Beyond the numbers, however, the 1950 halfpenny has a deeper significance. It represents one of the last years of George VI's coinage before Australia's coinage would soon face another historic transition with the accession of Queen Elizabeth II in 1952. To own a flawless 1950 halfpenny is not just to possess a rare numismatic treasure, but to hold a piece of Australian history at a turning point between eras. With its high-grade value of $150,000, the coin remains one of the most desirable and challenging issues in the series, a true prize for collectors who demand the very best. Next up, the 1951 Australian halfpenny is one of those coins that commands attention not only for its financial value, but also for its place in Australia's rich numismatic story. By the early 1950s, the kangaroo design that had been introduced in 1939 had already become a cultural emblem and was deeply ingrained in the nation's identity. The obverse of the coin still bore the portrait of King George VI, engraved by Thomas Humphrey Paget, a familiar sight to Australians who had used coins with his likeness since the late 1930s. On the reverse, George Kruger, Gray's bounding kangaroo, continued its proud leap across the face of the bronze coin, a design that connected Australians with their unique wildlife and their distinct national pride. Yet even though 1951 was a year of relatively strong mintage, it remains one of the most elusive and expensive halfpennies to acquire in true gem, uncirculated condition. The year 1951 was significant for other reasons as well. It was a period when Australia was transitioning into a new post-war era of growth and development. The hardships of the 1940s were gradually giving way to optimism, but coins were still being used relentlessly in everyday commerce. The halfpenny, being a small denomination, was a workhorse of the economy. Families used it to buy bread, milk, newspapers, and other necessities. Because of this constant circulation, nearly every 1951 halfpenny ended up showing wear, surface marks, or unattractive toning. Very few were set aside at the time of issue, and this is what has created the incredible condition rarity that defines the 1951 issue today. When one of these coins surfaces in pristine, high-grade condition, it is considered nothing short of a miracle survivor. Collectors place immense value on these pieces because they know how vanishingly rare they are. At major auctions, examples graded superb. Gem can bring prices as high as $430,000, a figure that reflects both their numismatic scarcity and their desirability. Among advanced collectors who aim to complete the Kangaroo half-penny series at the highest level, the 1951 halfpenny is not just a coin. It is a perfect relic of its time, struck during a period of transition, circulated through the hands of post-war Australians, and preserved against all odds. To own one today is to hold a small but powerful piece of Australia's cultural and economic journey, an artifact that tells a story of endurance, progress, and national pride. Next up, we move to the 1952 Australian halfpenny, another highly significant and valuable coin in the series, and one that carries with it a profound sense of history. This was the final year that King George VI would appear on Australia's coinage before his passing in February 1952 and the subsequent accession of Queen Elizabeth II. The 1952 halfpenny, therefore, stands at the crossroads of two reigns, making it not only a numismatic rarity, but also a piece of royal history. The obverse features the familiar bust of George VI, a design that Australians had known for more than a decade, while the reverse once again displays the bounding kangaroo that had by now become inseparable from Australia's identity. What makes the 1952 issue so remarkable, however, is not just its historical significance, but its scarcity in top condition. Like many of its predecessors, the coin was heavily circulated, and few were saved in mint state preservation. Those that do survive without wear often suffer from the usual problems seen in mid-century bronze coinage: spotting, uneven color, surface abrasions, or weak strikes. This means that true gem-quality examples are incredibly hard to come by, and when they do appear on the market, they attract fierce competition. Collectors and investors recognize the double significance of this coin, its rarity and high grades, and its position as the final halfpenny of the George VI era. The market value of the 1952 half-penny in top grade condition has reached as much as $220,000, a figure that reflects its desirability, and the fact that collectors know opportunities to acquire one are exceedingly rare. To hold a pristine 1952 halfpenny is to hold the end of an era, the last time George VI's portrait would grace Australia's bronze coinage before the dawn of the Elizabethan age. It is a coin that bridges the past and the future, a symbolic marker in both numismatic and royal history. Beyond its monetary worth, it represents a moment of transition, a reflection of how coins can capture history in metal form. For those who manage to secure a high-grade specimen, the 1952 halfpenny is not just an investment, but a treasure, one of the most historically and numismatically significant pieces in the entire Kangaroo halfpenny series.